Hello, everybody. It's Junior, your Lich, back with the Mite No podcast. God, episode 12? 12, I think? And we're with Rudy tonight. Say hi, Rudy.
Hello from the lunchtime.
It's Rudy. They're here. No, no one else. No Noriko today. She's not feeling okay, and that's fine. Hopefully, she'll be good for next week. So today's we're gonna be covering episodes 56 through 60s. We are almost out of the East Blue. So let's dive right into this. These are 5 filler episodes, and they are pretty pretty great, but they're also overall kind of action heavy. Which means we might get through them really fast because when there's a lot of action on screen, there's really not that much to talk about, like story or lore wise. So we continue a little bit of the flashback, and whatnot, and then we cut back to the crew, um, finding out about Ryuji. Um, and I just wrote down that Luffy's logic is flawless. There was some great shtick going on. Uh, I really liked it. Um, Nami was concerned at the start of the episode, how would they find Lost Island if it even exists? And Luffy's like, well, there's a Millennial Dragon right here. If the legend is tied to the Millennial Dragons, then clearly the island exists. And I'm just like, shit, man, he's right. If one of the two parts of the lore is like correct, why wouldn't the other part? It just makes sense. Um, and I love that logic. So the Marines show up to ruin the good times. Then we get a scene where they're waking up the crew members. Um, I just wrote down about sleep bubbles because this is a part of anime that has always bothered me. Like, what the fuck are sleep bubbles? How come when you pop them, a character just wakes up? I don't understand. But they pop Usopp's sleep bubble so he wakes up. They quickly explain the situation, and Nami declaratively states that the Mary is probably in danger. Because of course it is. These Marines aren't stupid. Well, they're kind of stupid. They were instructed to seize the ship, and they thought seizing the pirate ship meant putting like 5 people around it and then not doing anything to it. Which I found super stupid. So Usopp in the game gets introduced to uh old Grandpa Ryuji. Um, Usopp gets Frenched because he gets a little too close to Ryuji, who thinks he's food. So he just puts his whole head in his mouth. Um, there's some great Luffy and Usopp shtick. I absolutely loved it. Where Usopp is like freaking out. He's like, nah, nah, nah. See, this is the kind of thing where Luffy will say, hey, no problem. We'll get you to the Lost Island. And then it cuts to Luffy going, hey, that's exactly what I said. I looked at him and said, hey, I'll get you to the Lost Island. And it was really good. Like, I fucking loved it. We get so little good shtick, as the show continues later and things get more complex in the story. These little moments of the crew just being beautiful with each other, uh, it speaks to me. At which point Zoro offers a bit of advice, and I found his logic was flawless as well. And then we get oh, excuse me. I still have a bit of a cough. Um, but I'm on new meds for that. Hopefully that fixes it. We then get to see the monster trio deforest part of the island as Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji just destroy a small forest, which is very funny to me. I wrote down next that the island has a dick. I mean Usopp's nose. We discover that the island has a huge jutting off like what's the word for this? Peninsula that is just in the shape of a penis or Usopp's nose, depending on your position. Uh, I immediately could determine Nami's plan. Apis, for some reason, did not understand Nami's plan as they begin building a wooden wheeled raft to throw old man Ryuji on at the top of this cliff, leaning over the nose. Uh,
Hold on, wait, we're already here. Wait. This is already like episode 62. What's going on?
we're on 56. What are you talking about?
56, that's what I meant. I'm clearly on. I'm. What am I on about?
I don't know.
I apologize.
Okay. So Zoro and Usopp decide to go get the ship. Zoro pulls out some uh ridiculously thick reeds for them to breathe through that are like the size of their fucking head. Those are real inconspicuous. Um Mary gets fucking crashed up um against one of the Navy ships as Zoro and Usopp try to break free of the blockade, having rescued the ship. Mary gets scraped real bad. Aces gets word by the birds that shit's going down, and then we get introduced to Eric. We already knew Eric. We've already saw him when interacting with the villain of the arc, well, the other villain. Technically, Eric is like the main villain. But we actually get to see that he also has a devil fruit, the Kamakama no Mi, or the sickle fruit, which is a
No,
running joke. That
the
was that.
sicko fruit.
Yeah, it is a running joke that everyone just calls him by the slightly wrong name and believe that he is the sicko man, which is very much One Piece humor. Uh, I honestly love the idea of like a Kamitachi fruit. I'm surprised his fruit is not a Zoan fruit, which is like the weirdest part to me, because we will see later in the story people who have zone fruits, which are fruits that let you change into animals. I don't think we've seen anyone at this point in the story with a devil fruit like that. Um,
No.
so there are three types of devil fruits. There are devil fruits, like buggies, which are called paramecia, which are basically anything in the kitchen sink. That is just the name for any devil fruit that doesn't fit one of the other two types. Oda went, we'll call them paramecia, and I wanted to have any fruit imaginable that I can think of. If it isn't one of the other two fruits, it's this fruit. Um, there's literally basically no form or function to them that is standardized, except they are not one of the other two types of fruit. The other two types of fruit are zone fruits, which again, we haven't seen anyone in the story with one yet, but they give you the ability to turn into an animal, and usually give you a hybrid form, where you're half animal, half person. Um, Alternatively, the third type of fruit is called a Logia fruit. We've seen one Logia at this point, and that's Smoker. Which is
How did
why.
I know? Um,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was like, how did I know? It's like Logia sounds like Lowtown Smoker definitely has one.
It has nothing to do with Logtown. Um, Logias, their bodies become an element. They become a force of nature. So the reason Smoker couldn't get hit by Luffy is that his body is literally smoke. His veins are smoke. His lungs are smoke. He doesn't. That body he has is him forcing his smoke to maintain his normal shape, basically.
So basically, what we're saying is Smoker is basically invincible.
See, that's the thing.
And
Oh, we'll see here's the thing that you'll see characters bring up later. A lot of people, especially rookies, who get a Logia fruit, think they're invincible because they're basically untouchable. Then they get into the Grand Line and start losing hard. uh, there are ways to deal with them that are very common in the second half of the Grand Line, and the later part of the Grand Line. One way, of course, is what the Marines have. They have things that specifically work on devil fruit users, like handcuffs, nets, bullets that suppress their abilities. That will turn a Logia's person, like their body, into just their normal body. But it is an extremely powerful fruit and one of the rarest devil fruits, even among this already super rare item. Um, and we've only seen, God, like 10 Logias over the course of the whole series, or maybe even less.
Mm.
They're extremely powerful, a little bit broken. There's no way Luffy was ever winning that fight with Smoker at that point in the story. By the time Luffy and Smoker meet up later in the story, he outclasses Smoker so much that I think the only way Smoker would win is if Luffy just completely lets his guard down, which thankfully Luffy does all the time, so that doesn't matter. Um, but so we find out later that there can be zone fruits for mythological creatures, animals that aren't real but mythological creatures like a phoenix or a dragon or a chimera or a fucking kamaitachi, a sickle weasel. Literally this dude's fruit. Like he he gets the design of being like based off like the kamaitachi. I think that's the name of it. But it's a Japanese mythological creature that can create whirlwinds. It's a sickle weasel. It's a weasel with like a pair of sickles for hands or is wielding a pair of sickles. It can create wind slashes. It can create her like tornado level winds and cutting wind slashes. In Naruto, you even see Tamari, the lady with the big fan who does the wind slashes. She gets a summon at one point in the story, and it's a sickle weasel. Um, so it just I don't know if maybe at this point Oda wasn't sure that was a thing he was gonna include, or they asked him if he could use they could use that fruit. So this is a big thing with the filler, Rudy, because this is our first real big filler. Um, and this is also true for the movies. If the animation crew are going to use a devil fruit, they explicitly have to get Oda's permission
Okay.
because only one person can have a fruit at a time. There aren't duplicates of this fruit. There isn't a second Gum Gum no Me user running around who's also made of rubber. The fruits are unique. So if they in a filler give someone a fruit, Oda can't use it unless that character dies in the series. Um
Mm.
so whenever there's a movie coming out or whatever there's a character in a filler arc with a devil fruit. That devil fruit has been cleared by Oda as something they can use. Now, this makes me think maybe at some point in the story, he's gonna hit us with like the actual sickle weasel fruit. And that's the reason he didn't let them use it for this guy and gave them here, just give him like a shitty version that just makes him do the wind slash without being able to turn into a cool sickle weasel. Um, but it could also just be he didn't want to introduce zone fruits at this point because they become super relevant in the start of the next story arc, or in one of the next arcs within the Alabasta saga. Um, but we find out that he is a devil fruit. He cuts Luffy and Sanji a little bit, and we find out that he can, with his sharp fingernails, basically create wind blades. And that's the episode. Like, not a lot happens.
Oh yeah, they set sail for the Lost Island because Luffy doesn't know where it is.
Well, they do. They just don't know that they do yet. So
Yeah.
Sanji kicks Ryuji down the mountain, uh, and they start going. That happens in this episode as well. They basically ride the raft with Ryuji down the mountain, barreling past Eric. They land on top of a marine ship mast to slow the raft, breaking and heavily damaging the warship, landing Ryuji in the water, and then tethering him to the boat, the Mary, and then they head off to try and find this island, um, the Lost Island. So we go to episode 57, and I. I must have been feeling very funny because my first line of my notes is on the sea dragon, D's nuts. Um,
Of course you will.
I I have never D's nuts before in my life. What the fuck does that mean? This might be the first D's nuts that have ever left my fucking
It's
mouth.
just I expected at this point.
Why?
I
I've never
expect
done it before.
I know I expect these nuts jokes anywhere.
Oh,
Like
okay. I'm
if
like I'm
someone's gonna
offended
make
that you
that
would think that
joke,
I am someone who does that.
I'm like, yeah, I expected that because I hear so many of these nuts jokes all the time.
So
Some of them from me out, but
they 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 set sail. Eric decides that they're going to follow the ship because clearly they're gonna get to the Lost Island. They have a lead. Um, we find out that the evil murder guy Eric is evil to the evil murder guy Commodore Nelson. Like he's definitely planning to betray him. Um, and get the Dragonite for himself. And we then immediately find out that Nelson clearly knows that Eric is doing this and immediately begins to just counteract it. And I'm just like, all right, that was like 3 minutes of just evil guys twirling their mustaches in secret at each other. Uh, which I just find really, dumb. Oh, my next note is Appis's cooking. Okay, so in my note, it definitely looks like it says Appis's cock ring. I really gotta work better on writing more clearly. Your model is freaking the fuck out. There you go.
Oh.
You were like sort of like trying to eat me. Uh, um, so Apis shows up with a bunch of food, and everyone's like, "Oh God, she cooked again." And then Sanji shows up, and they're like, "Ah, Sanji made it! Yay!" Apis stomps on Usopp's foot. Uh, Luffy hears food, throws up his hands, and grabs the hot pot. Because we see Apis coming up with oven mitts on, but Luffy just grabs it with his bare hands because he's a fucking idiot. So it's hot, and he just pours the whole thing on top of Ruji's head, which triggers a goddamn episode of his dementia or PTSD
Oh.
or whatever the fuck is going on with him, and he remembers that the island that they need to go to is to the east. Um, I say that the moments where Ryuji has flashes to a literal 1,000-year memory, like 1,000-year-old memory, are really good. Like I like this film. I might meme on it a little bit for it being extremely basic and the enemies being like the villains being super camp and shitty, but I love this story. And I just sympathize with Ryuji, who's like this just old fucking man who's like several thousand years old. And yeah, it was very good. So they decide to go east. And then we get a scene that launched 1,000 ships where Zoro and Sanji are cleaning the dishes. And Sanji just acts like they're a married couple in the cutest fucking way possible. Where every time he hands him a dish, he goes, "Here, Zoro," and then changes how he says his name every time. And after like 8 times, Zoro's go, do you really have to say my name every time? And it's just like, oh my god. Like, I remember this scene. I didn't remember it was in filler, but it's so gay. It's so. You could tell that whoever wrote this filler arc definitely shipped Zoro and Sanji and fucking was just like leaning into it. Like, there's no reason for this scene to exist other than to make them be gay as shit together. Like we never see the Straw Hat Crew doing dishes. We don't see them doing chores. We never see Sanji cook food half the time. Food just magically appears and he walks out of a kitchen with a ladle in his hand. He's like, "I cooked enough for an army of like 400 people. Come eat." And it's just like this is just one of those moments where it's just like, the person writing this story has an agenda, and that agenda is they think Zoro and Sanji are a cute couple. Uh, we go up into the crow's nest after the cute boys' love scene, um, where Nami and Usopp are discussing how they haven't found anything yet, and Usopp holds up this fucking like ingot of steel, and is like, "Well, we could drop this on Ryuji's head and hope it jostles some more memories up." And Nami's like, "Or you could not kill the old man," and then Usopp promptly drops it on his foot, which again would normally break a man's foot, but Usopp is incredibly resilient.
Oh yeah, I can't tell. Is Eric's glasses black or green?
They're black, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. they look they look both of those colors, so I was like, which one is it?
So we get a scene where Luffy is on his seat in the Mary, which means he's sitting up on the top of the head of the Mary, and he notices a weird bit of smoke in the distance. Usopp and Nami are dealing with Apis and the dragon and are trying to get more information. And then we cut back to Luffy, who is just watching this smoke cloud turn into a ship and not telling anyone. Like, that is my favorite part of this. Luffy is just like, oh, this is curious. Oh, well, we'll be able to see it better when we get closer. And then it's like, oh, it's a ship, but it looks kind of weird. Oh, well, we'll be right on it real soon. It's just like, say something. Say something to anyone. God. Um, However, as we get closer, we see it become a reflection of the Mary. And in my head, I'm just like, oh, it's a mirage. All right, sweet. So the island is hidden behind some sort of mirage wall. Um, which turns out to be the case. Basically, the ship sails through the mirage wall. The Marines lose sight of them because they just fucking disappear off the ocean. And uh, Eric demands they go further, and the fucking vice lieutenant is like, fuck no. And he's like, well, give me a dinghy. I'll fucking do it, you useless prick. So they give him a dinghy. Um, Now, inside the Mirage, they discover a constant typhoon. It is just always typhooning here, which is very much a grand line kind of thing. It's not really a thing we normally see in the East Blue. Um, However, in the center of this raging typhoon, they see an island, right in the eye of the storm. So they go there. Um, and they head their way into there. There's some great shtick as they start making their way up. Apis talks to the birds, finds some old relics that have like dragon iconography on them. The birds tell Apis that there is a dragon temple at the top of the island. So they pull Ryuji all the way up to the top. They get to the door. Apis thinks her locket is the key to open the door, but she can't reach, and it's fucking adorable. Where she has this moment of build up, and everyone's waiting on her for her to put it in, and she can't fucking reach it. And she just turns her face around and she's crying. And I'm like, oh my god, she's like 8. What is she doing here with these reckless idiots? Um, so Luffy goes and does it, and of course the ground collapses under them, and that's the end of the episode. Any comments on 57 so far? Ready? Ready?
Alright.
Alright. Any comments on episode 57 that I might have missed? Or that you want to add?
Uh, Not really. I think you summarized it pretty well. Yeah, I remember the first episode when you were talking about some of the stuff. For some reason, I thought that happened in the next episode.
Nope.
I don't know why. Probably the rolling down part because that also happened.
It does happen, but that
But
happens in episode 58, yeah.
and that's why I was confused.
Yeah.
That was probably why.
That's because that happens twice. Speaking of episode 58, and this might be the first episode of this podcast that's under an hour, by the way. Because there are 3 episodes left, and I'm not gonna lie, it is 1 page of my notes for all 3 episodes. The last episode
Really?
is like 6 lines of text. Because it's just action. It's just action scenes and really emotional dialogue. But like, none of it was that was all it was though. It's a lot of sad moments, it's a lot of cool moments, but they drag on a long time because animation, and nothing really happens other than those moments, and then those moments take up a full 20-minute episode or 18-minute episode. So like, yeah, like literally my last notes for episode 60 are 6 lines of a sheet of loose leaf. So like we might get out of here in like sub 50. So speaking of episode 58, they fall into this dragon shrine. Nami does the archaeology thing, and just looks at stuff and determines that from the map on the ceiling that this is not Lost Island, but this is in fact an island that the dragons used as a marker to get to Lost Island, where Appis's grandparents, her ancestors, not grandparents, but ancestors 1,000 years ago, used to live. And this was right on the path of the the Millennial Dragons. And the Lost Island is Warship Island, the place we just left. And that might feel kind of shitty. However, there's a really fucking beautiful moment. Then I did see this episode is the most texted of all three of these next of these episodes. Um, we get Luffy being there. So this is a spoiler for something that we've brought up before on the show, but and they really put it home in this filler, which I found very interesting. There is a thing in the One Piece universe that we will learn about much later, referred to only as the voice of all things. There are people in One Piece who are born with the ability to hear the voice of all things, which means even if they can't understand the language something is trying to communicate with, if they have a moment of connection with something, they can understand what it means, what it's feeling, what it wants. They can hear its voice, its will. Luffy is seen over the course of the show to have this. It is something very rare that only a few other characters in the show have been shown to have, but it's something that many characters know about. Um, and we've seen it happen a few times in canon up to this point, where Luffy just seems to know what an animal is thinking. But in this, like, Apis has a devil fruit. I don't know if I missed the line where she tells them she has a devil fruit, but Apis has a devil fruit. I don't know if that's ever officially revealed or if it was revealed after the filler was over. Because I must have missed the line because I've been looking for it and I haven't noticed it, or it was when she was introduced. But Apis, I believe, technically has like I forget the name of the fruit, but her ability is literally the ability to talk with animals. So the reason she can communicate with Ruji flawlessly is she can actually understand what he's saying. We can't. We don't have that devil fruit. And this is something that sort of comes up with Luffy sometimes, where Luffy will hear the voice of a thing, but we don't get to hear it because we don't have the voice of all things. Luffy does. So it's this really beautiful moment where Ruji is sort of like sad, like he's confused, he's tired, he's ancient, and he just made his friends run all this way for nothing. And then we get this beautiful moment where Apis is really sad that they were possibly on the Lost Island. The dragon nest was somewhere on the island they were, and they fucking ran away from it. And Usopp cheers her up, and it's so good. And then Nami joins in, and then Sanji joins in. Then fucking Zoro shows up, and Zoro says this beautiful line. And he's like, "There's nothing wrong with living a roundabout life," and I'm like, "Holy shit!" That is the most poetic thing that has ever left Zoro's fucking mouth. Like, this is amazing. The boys are good. I literally just write the crew is good egg. That's my note. That's my note for this part. The crew as a whole is good egg. They're just it's so it's so fucking wholesome. And it makes Apis feel better. And it's just like, yeah, we might have wasted a bit of time, but like now we know for sure it's there instead of just kind of guessing. And it's like, who cares if we just lived life in a bit of a circle? There's nothing wrong with living life in a circle. And it's just like, God, I want to cry. This is so poetic. And then Luffy bashes his head against the wall like he's a high school football player whose only dream in life is to pay off his parents' mortgage, buy his dad a nice classic Mustang, and then die of 25 where his brain turns to goo. Uh, Fuck me. Luffy's like, well, I guess we gotta fucking get out of here. And he runs face first into a wall. Jesus. And it works. I forgot that it works. Because it doesn't at first. And everyone's like, you idiot. And then the wall beside where he hits with his head collapses. And everyone's like, oh my god, it worked. Which I found very funny. Around this point, Eric shows up and is like, haha, I'm evil, she. I'm gonna kill the dragon. um, and then Zoro's like, hey, Luffy, this guy does weird air slash things, right? That's my fetish. Can I have him? And Luffy's like, you got it, bro. I'm not gonna kink shame you. Um, and I mean, he doesn't, for what it's worth.
Just making things up.
So there's this beautiful moment where Eric jumps down and we hear the sound. So this happens a lot in this filler, and I'm not a fan of it. But there is a lot of fighting that happens in this filler that never gets animated. People will fight on screen, off screen. We'll see random shots of scenery, and then it will cut to people frozen mid-fight reacting to something. So we hear the sounds of these fights happening, and we're like, "Holy shit, Zoro's really giving it his all." And then we cut to the fight, and Luffy's just standing next to Zoro, who's like locked with fucking Eric, who's just fighting him with his fucking fingernails, which doesn't work against katanas, just saying. And Zoro's like, "Will you fucking go?" And it's like, "Oh, they've supposed to have been running away this whole time, and they've just been watching the fight like idiots." And Luffy's like, "Oh yeah, I guess we could." So they kick Ruji down the mountain. This is where Rudy got confused, as they ride they ride the dragon down the mountain again. Uh,
Wait. It
um,
looks so steep as well. It feels like you actually would die if you were on that ride.
oh, 100%. I mean, maybe not if you're a dragon. I imagine Ruji's got some pretty thick scales. As we'll see in like the next episode, he gets hit with a lot of cannons and doesn't go down for a while. Um, so,
I
uh,
honestly, from seeing all of them get hit with all those cannons, I honestly thought he would probably just tank it all.
he's very old. So Eric is like, I don't have any reason to fight you, Zoro. I just want the dragon. So he runs and jumps off the cliff, and Zoro runs and jumps off the cliff, and then they just start Tarzaning down trees. And I'm like, this isn't how fucking trees work. Uh, and then we get this just whole shtick of like Zoro catching up to Eric and saying, "I'm not letting you chase after them, you fucking idiot." Eric immediately outsmarting Zoro, or at least out clevering him for a few seconds, and then getting ahead. Zoro picks up a stick and throws it, and it gets between Eric's legs, and he falls down. So Zoro just has him pinned, and instead of just fucking killing him, which like later Zoro, future Zoro, totally would have just killed this guy at this point, 100%. Current Zoro is like, now you stay right there, and I'm like, what? You gotta go and catch up to them too. Why are you telling him to stay there? Like, what are you doing? Just kill him and keep moving. And then instead of the usual uh pocket sand, we get actual sand, where Eric just grabs some dirt and throws it in Zoro's eyes, and that's how he gets out of that situation. Um, One of the birds tells Apis, now that they've crashed down by the water, that Zoro's in danger. So Luffy does the Zoro shtick, where he stretches his arm much further than his limb will normally travel, all the way up the island to the mountain where Zoro is, and grabs him blind. And Zoro's like, "Wait, no, not this shtick again," because at this point, it is a running gag in this filler arc that, like, coming off of Arlong Park, this just keeps happening to Zoro, and it will happen like 3 times in this filler arc. Um, comedy magic 3, so I'm kind of into it. So Zoro gets whipped away from Eric, who's just like, "Damn." Um, so they get on their ship, sail out of the Mirage, and head back to Warship Island. At which point that they see Nelson is there with the 8th Fleet. His huge battleship is there. I kind of miss when we got to see a lot of Marine characters with crazy, crazy unique ships like the pirates get. Uh, Because later on, like, you see some unique details on, like, Vice Admiral ships, but for the most part, the Marine ships all just become, like, generic warships. We don't really see crazy shit like this ridiculous, like, gargoyle faced battle cruiser. And then the fleet just fans out from behind that ship, which I'm pretty sure isn't how warships work. Also, I'd like to point out that these warships are fucking huge. I don't know if these are the same warships we'll see later in the series, but Oda, as he probably shouldn't have done, has posted like the sizes of some of these ships. The typical Navy like warship is literally a city. Like it can hold like I think it's like 1,000 crew or something. Like they are floating cities. They are massive. When you play the One Piece video games, they are literally like an entire Assassin's Creed explorable level. Like it takes you forever climbing to the top of them and jumping from place to place. They're huge. Um and there's just like an army of them. um and Apis is all freaking out and she's like, "Ah, we got Luffy, we're fine." because I just like to point out when Nami has absolute pure blind faith in Luffy, uh, because it's just my fetish. It makes me happy all over my body. So whenever Nami gets that moment where someone else is in doubt and she just looks forward and goes, "Nope, this is the man who freed me from slavery, saved my sister and my entire village. I believe in this man, even if it kills me." And I'm just like, damn, that's good. That's the good shit. And that's episode 58. All right, so if we're gonna get through this in sub 50, we're gonna need to zoom past the next episode a little bit.
And
Did you have any comments on 58 first? Just in case I missed something you wanted to bring up?
no, I'm good.
All right, 59. So we open with some actual flag communication where the Marines who are chasing Luffy see the Marines that have pinned Luffy and see them raising a flag to communicate with them what is going on. This, as far as I know, never happens again in One Piece. But I love it. It's great. We see Apis running down to get onto the fucking raft with the dragon, which is 9 kinds of reckless. Um, they're shooting cannons at them, and Luffy and them are evading them. So he says, "Bring out the big cannon." I'm like, everyone's got a buggy ball these days. That's literally my note. Usopp, though, seeing the enemy whip out this ridiculously oversized cannon to shoot at them, goes, "I can hit that," and shoots a cannonball into their cannon, so that as they shoot their cannon, the two balls collide within the chamber and just blow up on the flagship, which is great because it's just Usopp being amazing. We see Zoro get some bad luck with Luffy again, where he gets pinned into a wall by Luffy doing a rocket. As Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy jump aboard one of the warships to cut down the steel chains um, that are sort of trapping the Mary in its place. Now, so this is a huge problem because in Arabasta, a big plot point is Zoro can't cut steel at the time when he needs to cut steel. It's a thing that happens, and just seeing him just pausing for a moment and cutting these steel bars, I was just like, hey, wait a minute, his whole character in Alabasta was about doing this. What the fuck, game? I was like, hold on. This, you fucked up. You put the cart before the horse, you fuckers. So we'll pretend that after this, Zoro forgets how to cut steel. Um, However, this might be a hint to Zoro having Haki, that ability we mentioned later. Um, Basically, in the next art, he taps into that force again without knowing what it is. Um, and we won't find out what that is for a very long time. But Zoro is shown to be one of the characters who has it from very early on, even if he doesn't know what it is. Um, so during all this, the Sicko Fruit guy shows up to steal the dragon. While Luffy and them are away from the ship, he basically takes Apis hostage to do that. Um, and then as he's sailing away, he has a talking conversation with Nelson, who's on he's like a quarter mile away from him on the other side of a battlefield up in a ship, and they just talk to each other like they can hear each other. And I got furious that there's no way this conversation could be happening. And if it was, then at any point where anyone on the Straw Hat ship said anything, every Marine should be able to hear it, because that was the exact tone of voice they were using to communicate. It was super stupid. Um, so Apis is again trying to stop Eric from doing the bad thing and killing the old dragon. Uh, Eric has basically bartered the lives of the Marines in his rowboat by saying, "Hey, now Nelson's gonna try and kill me, so if you don't want to die, you better row us out of here faster." Apis is trying to stop him. He picks her up. Apis is trying to stop him. He's threatening her. She bites his hand. He throws her to the boat. She yells in pain and sort of faints because he's like a pretty strong guy, and she's a fucking 8-year-old. Um, Hearing Apis goes down makes the dragon mad, and we see Ryuji for the first time move and stand, and you get an actual genuine feeling that this dottery old fucking thing is intimidating as the Marines jump the ship. And Eric's like, "What? Where are you going?" And then he turns around and sees the fucking dragon looming over him. And it's like, oh yeah, Ryuji is like really big and an animal. So he bashes Eric away, who for some reason doesn't end up in the ocean. Whatever. Don't worry, Eric will die later. So Ryuji gets fucking mad. He starts screaming into the air, uttering a call, which is like ear shattering. I love the way it's designed. I love the audio. I love the visuals. It's fantastic. And Ryuji just has this moment where he looks down at Apis, who is like unconscious, as he starts screaming, and you see him start building up the strength to fly again, and my heart grows 10 sizes. Oh, and Apis wakes up and he tells her, I'm gonna fly. I'm gonna do it. And Apis is cheering him on, like, you can do it. Fly and get away from here. And he's like, oh no, I'm gonna fucking kill these people. And that's that episode. Um, which is great. But basically, I wrote down that Ryuji's design is super Ghibli. Like, I don't know why, but the way he looks just reminds me of Princess Mononoke so much. Basically, Ryuji takes off into the sky, um, and begins flying towards the Commodore ship. And the whole time, Apis is telling him to fly away, get away. Like, this is your chance. Luffy and the others have stopped their cannons. This is your chance to get away. Um, Nelson is panicking and just orders they shoot down the dragon. Which I'd like to point out that trying to use cannons on a moving fucking ship that are bobbing up and down against a moving target would already be pretty hard, but let alone a target as small as fucking a bird in the sky that's flying. Like, the fact that any of these cannons hit this fucking dragon is ridiculous. But that's beside the point. Ryuji starts bellowing more, uttering this call out to the universe, and he begins flying at the bad men who would dare hurt his friend. You see his body get peppered with cannonball, 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 and he nosedives into the water, not able to fly anymore. These explosions sort of riddling his body, though he looks totally fine. Those scales are like 3,000 years old. They're tough as nails. But he crashes into the water, not able to make it to the ship, and it just sort of floats there. And then we see Luffy jump to him, and again, Luffy is hearing what Ryuji is saying, and Ryuji sort of seems to think this is the end of him, and Luffy's trying to encourage him to go on, and that's the end of the episode. Uh, Anything you wanted to add, Rudy, before we move on to episode 60? If you're replying, you're muted.
Did not see that. We did the fact that Luffy used to come Bridge, right, to let Sanji and Zoro
No,
on the.
I did not specifically mention that, but yes, he does reuse a variation of the suspension
Yeah,
bridge
and that's how
where he does
Luffy got
one arm. Anytime Luffy
Yeah.
uses these weird one-off gum techniques, we should take note of it.
I mean, I remember that from looking at the footage as well, so I just was reminded. I was like, did you talk about that?
I didn't, but yes, Luffy throws at his arm to one of the warships, and Zoro and Sanji run along the length of his arm. Like, running on like something that narrow is difficult already. Luffy's rubber. That's not rigid. He'd be bobbing him up and down. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Um, so
Either way, episode 60.
yeah, episode 60. Ryuji starts to sink in the water, and Luffy calls him a fucking wimp. Like, Luffy's like, quit it with this fucking quitter talk, you fucking piece of shit. You promised Apis you'd get there. We promised we'd get you there. You're fucking not dying. Um, and he and Luffy seem to exchange this conversation, and Luffy calms down a little bit about the fact that Ryuji's dying. Um, because Ryuji sort of gives him his like last will and testament, basically. Um, so there's a scene where I just wrote down that Luffy is fucking insane, which is again my notes for this episode are like a total of 6 lines, and this takes up almost one of the entire lines. Uh, the fucking Commodore decides to harpoon Ryuji's corpse to pull it closer so they can get the bones for the Dragonite for the elixir of immortality. And Luffy catches the fucking harpoon out of the air and is pissed.
And then he's like, I'm throwing this back at you.
Yes.
Oh,
He fucking blows a hole through the ship. Um which is, oh my god, so good. And then we get, I just wrote down fucking these conversations, because Luffy is just talking with Commodore Nelson, though there's no way they could possibly be having this conversation. Um, but there's a beautiful moment, and I wrote down that this is huge foreshadowing to a very important moment later. And it is. This part of this storyline, this exact moment where Luffy is protecting a friend from dying, though in this case Ryuji is dying, and he's dealing with someone referring to it as a thing, something to be harvested, something to be captured, a thing, not a person, a thing. And Luffy says, this isn't a thing, this is my friend. I start crying. I'm crying right now as I talk about this. I'm tearing up, so I'm going to move on a little bit. But this is huge foreshadowing to a moment much later in the story that I don't know they knew they were foreshadowing, but we will see Luffy be put in a similar situation where someone he cares about is being treated as a thing, and
Mm.
it's a very important moment in One Piece. And I just wanted to bring it up that when we get to that moment later, I will be able to go back to this episode and say, haha, here we were.
I
Thankfully,
can imagine. Sorry, I
go
can
ahead.
imagine several characters, either from other franchises or something, where if that was Luffy's friend, Luffy would definitely like treating them as like he does with Ryu here.
Well, basically, all things are people to
He
Luffy
treats
unless
every
they're food. That that is
treats everything.
that is Luffy's kind of like modus operandum. Everything is a friend or potential friend or at least a person unless it's food.
Mm.
So at this point, the dragons show up, a huge flock of them, and they begin uttering these ancient cries and circling the water. And Nami clues in to the dragons and the whole mystery of everything. They aren't called the Millennium Dragons because they live for 1,000 years. They're called the Millennium Dragons because they are migratory and their migration path takes 1,000 years to complete. Basically revealing that beneath Warship Island is the Lost Island. However, there is a special tide that only occurs once every 1,000 years, and that is when the dragons arrive. The old and sick lay into the ground and die, allowing their bodies to fossilize into the seashore and become the nest through which new eggs are hatched, and then in this weird pseudo phoenix rebirth where new life is born nestled under the protection of old death. Where basically we discovered that this is the nest. Ryuji made it, but it's not just a nest. It's a graveyard. And Nami brings up a line about
Wait,
elephants and elephant graveyards. Um,
we're skipping ahead. Hang on, hang on, hang on,
that's
hang
just the
on.
next part of my
We
note.
what?
That's just the next part of my notes.
No, I would say we're skipping ahead because we have to talk about how ridiculously over the top and insane that was. Even I was like, oh god.
Do you mean the
To
Gum
really,
Gum no Ono, the battle axe? That's in the next part of my
yeah,
notes.
but that was before this.
Well, listen, timey wimey, time is just a big old circle. Don't worry about it.
Literally just
So
grabs onto the dragon, he's
as the dragons are happening, Luffy grabs a hold of one of the dragons in the air. It says, "I'm sorry for apologizes for using his body without permission." And then does
like, I'm sorry, your
possibly
neck.
my favorite Gum Gum technique. Um, and not just because of this, but basically it has a few variations over the course of the show, and sometimes it gets a different name when he uses it in different ways. But there's something about him just throwing his foot up into the fucking skybox and just shattering anything in front of him is beautiful.
Just like
He
it's like
uses it.
Gundam Battle. Like this man literally cut the whole damn ship in half,
He
just barely
does
missing Commodore Nelson.
he
Even I was shocked knowing Luffy's power.
he did cut the ship. Oh, I mean, at this point, Luffy is going to the Grand Line. Luffy is the biggest bounty in the East Blue. He's fucking tough. But he cuts the ship in half, sending most of the sailors into the water. But of course, the water drains with the low tide. so they don't drown or anything. But I did just write in my notes the just fuck I love Ono, referring to the Gum Gum Battle Axe. Ever since Arlong Park, where he uses it to split the park in half, it has been like one of my favorite techniques. I think I like the variations of the bazooka a little more, especially the rifle, which we haven't seen yet, I don't think. Um, but he has a move called the Gum Gum Rifle that I fucking adore. Um, but yeah, Luffy falls out of the sky, lands back on the sunny. It goes full Looney Tunes, which is fucking hilarious. Uh, and I won't comment any more about that, but that is a thing that I will bring up again much later. Um, and there's this great moment where Luffy's just like, "Yo," and Nami's like, "It's no fucking yo, you piece of shit! You almost killed us." Um, which in Japanese was much more eloquent, and very funny. Apis is just shattered that Ryuji is dead because this he's dead. He's dead. He's fucking dead. And she's sad that she couldn't keep her promise. Luffy dumps some exposition onto her that about what Ryuji had told him when they were together in those last moments, how she had kept her promise, how her being his friend for this last year made it the happiest year in 1,000 years. Because again, he got separated from the rest of the flock 1,000 years ago and has been trying to wait for this moment where he knew they would come back. And he did it all alone until like a year ago where he met Apis, the first human who could interact with him. Luckily enough, right? Um, and it's this beautiful moment. It's sad. I cry. I usually cry before this. Um, this part I don't find as sad because it's just how I'm built. Um, Apis sees a new baby being born, hears it's crying. It's being born, hatching from an egg, just a ways away from where Ruji's body is resting, and it's being born under the calcified, fossilized remains of another ancient dragon. And again, this is where that whole talk about this sort of phoenixical nature of the thousand-year dragons, the Millennium Dragons, where their bodies crystallize and fossilize and become the nest for future generations. Um, Apis accepts this new life. It motivates her to move on, and she seems sad but happy at the same time. As the
See, I
crew,
saw that.
go ahead.
Sorry, I thought that the baby dragon was like Ryu's reincarnated form, and it looked at Apis and recognized her.
See, that's a
I didn't.
possibility. They were kind of talking about it like the Phoenix stuff was less metaphorical, but we can't hear what Apis heard, so I don't know. Um, it could be that they are literally phoenixes. Like, that could be a legitimate thing that they come here, die, and when they die, one of the eggs hatches and it's them again. We don't know that for sure. I kind of prefer to think that it isn't. Um, because that makes Ryuji's death more special. It doesn't really mean
I mean,
anything
that's,
to die if you know you're just gonna respawn like 30 seconds later. I'm just saying.
that's just how I think of it, right? Because of what I've seen.
And maybe that's just your interpretation of the story, which is completely valid.
Hmm.
I think that they're definitely writing it, so that could be the answer. I like to think it's not because I think it means more story wise that it isn't. But that's just me and my interpretation of the story. And I like that we differ on that. The crew start walking away. Apis is like, we really need to get back to the village. Don't know how they're gonna do that with their ship fucking locked on the bottom of the sea, but whatever. Um, they need to get back to the village and like, because everyone's probably confused with this whole island showing up and the dragons. And they, talk a bit more about the dragon bones and how you couldn't get anything from the coral covered fossilized remains, and how the whole elixir of immortality was probably just a lie, anyways. because people just didn't know anything about these dragons and they seemed to live for thousands of years. However, Nelson is there, and he's like, I don't need to worry about trying to pick things out of these fossilized remains. I have a whole flock of living dragons to kill. And then Eric shows up and is like, move. And Nelson is like,
Just
there's
shit.
there's enough here for both of us to be immortal. I'll pay you whatever you want. And Eric kills him. Like I don't
Oh,
remember. I don't remember at this point if Nelson is
like,
actually dead.
it's like he slashes him, and I think it's like made to think that he's dead because he doesn't reappear in the
I
episode.
don't believe anyone is dead in One Piece till I see a corpse. Um,
Okay.
as a
I
general
mean,
rule, as a
I thought like was right. They literally made like marks through his skin. They look maybe kind of deep. I would just assume he's dead.
I think he could be dead, but because this is especially because this is a filler character, he's just out of the story. I don't believe he becomes relevant in the next few episodes as this part ends up. But you see Eric, and the episode ends with him looming over the Straw Hats, just looking pissed at them. Like he's kind of just given up on the immortality at this moment. He just wants to fucking kill these people for fucking with him and making him look like an idiot and getting in his way.
And fixing up his hair while he does it as well. Like,
Yeah, it's full
how dare
JoJo. The hair goes straight up in curls. It's the full JoJo. But that is the episode, and we're caught up. And the next
wow,
blocks
that's like
episode,
50 minutes.
yeah, 5640. A little bit long, honestly. I surprised at myself with just how much I had to rant about some of the things in there. But I guess I did have to do a small explanation about the different types of devil fruits for the first time, so
Hmm.
that ate up some time. So next session, we will absolutely 100% be entering the Grand Line. Super exciting. Now, as a future announcement to the Mite No podcast, we don't know yet 100% if Ruty will be able to join us as frequently on the show for the next little while. However, if Noriko is still feeling unwell and not able to join recording, uh, and if Rudy can come in any of the other alternate times I'm available, then we will always be able to do the thing if Noriko isn't here. Uh, because if Noriko can't make it, but we can make it, then we can just do it on whatever time we want, because that makes sense. Um, but we'll see moving forward. No matter what, I'm gonna I'm gonna be finding a way to do this Meet Meet No podcast. I'm fucking committed. I'm 60 episodes deep. I ain't stopping for nobody. I'm fucking making this shit happen. I'm 12
I mean, I might
episodes
as
in.
well the next 5 episodes because it's gonna happen at some point.
Oh yeah, you gotta even if you can't even if you can't make it, you gotta keep up anyways. You gotta start watching the podcast to keep informed if you miss too.
Oh.
But with any luck, you'll be able to join me next week because I really want to see your reaction to the Grand Line. And I really want to see your interactions with a character we're about to be introduced to. Uh, I'm very excited. But we should wrap up unless you have any other announcements so we can actually keep this under 1 hour. Because I want to, because that sounds important to me right now.
Yeah, we can wrap up.
Alrighty, well, this has been Junior and Rudy on the Mite No podcast, episode 12. We'll be back with episode 13. I don't know who'll be with me, but we'll be talking One Piece and we'll be out of the East Blue, baby. Alright, everybody, have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Grand Line.
Bye.